Good evening, everybody. I hope you're all doing well. Welcome to our OM System monthly Ask Me Anything session. This time we have themed this one the winter episode. We're coming into winter now, and we thought, what a great way to get your technical questions in about the cold, about the snow. But we can probably squeeze some other questions in as well if we need to. We have got a fabulous guest tonight. Our lovely Tomas is sick, so we drafted in an amazing ambassador who I will introduce to you in a second. We have David Smith in the background and the comments, so thank you, David, for that. Yay! We also have Tito Garcia, who's our technical expert for Spain. Hey, Tito.
Hello, how are you? Hi,
yes,
everyone.
I'm very well. How are you?
I'm doing well. Nervous as usual, but doing well.
You look amazing with your dark background, very sophisticated. I love it.
Yeah, thank you.
So I did say that we had specially requested this guest to come tonight. This guest, he photographed out in the cold. He comes from the cold and lives in the cold. So there is a perfect person, a wildlife photographer, to answer some of your questions. We have the amazing OM System ambassador, Espen Helland. Espen.
Hello. Hi, everybody.
Hey. Welcome,
Hi,
Espen. Thank you so much for joining us on such short notice tonight. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Happy to be here.
It's going to be fun. It's going to be really good fun, I am sure. So as usual, you are more than welcome to say hello in the comments. But what we like to do on these Ask Me Anything sessions is exactly that. We like to get as many questions in from you as possible and try and answer as many as possible. So you've got myself and Tito, who are the technical experts tonight, and then David's in the background. If we don't know what we're doing, we'll shout for David. But then, of course, you've got the wonderful Espen, who will give you answer your questions about photography in the cold. So those are really good things to ask while he's here. Use that knowledge. So keep the questions coming in, and we've got an hour. So shall we get straight into it? Shall we? We might as well. Okay. So I am going to go straight in to this first question, and it's from Don Pickard. Don says, while shooting in manual, the front and rear wheels control aperture and shutter speed. Is there a way to control exposure compensation so as not to blow out the highlights? Well, the answer is yes. You can configure the buttons. You could put exposure compensation somewhere else. It depends on which camera you've got, depending on the settings, doesn't it, Tito? Like, for instance, if you have an EM1X, you hold the button down and you can control your exposure compensation that way. What do you think, Tito? What's your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, when you are using different modes, the priority on the aperture, the priority on the speed, you can compensate the exposure with the button, the exposure compensation button. When you are working with the manual mode, it will work with the ISO. So you have the ISO in the auto mode. When you move the exposure compensation and you press the button, it will move the ISO in order to compensate what you need. If you are overexposing or you are underexposing, it will play with the ISO to feel the proper exposure. Yeah.
Wonderful. So it does depend on which model you have. As I said, I've just sort of demonstrated it on the EM1X, but they are pretty similar. When you press the exposure compensation, obviously, if you're just using it in the normal mode, then you're right, the manual aperture and shutter speed disappear and then the compensation goes on. But at least you're in that setting, in those manual settings, and then you can check. So we hope that answers your question.
Can I throw in something here?
Yes.
Yeah. I actually tend to shoot in a slightly different way because, as you say here, the front and rear usually controls the aperture and shutter speed. But what I found very useful for me as a wildlife photographer, I mostly shoot with the aperture wide open. It's a certain situation when I have more animals in the frame, I want to use aperture. So I shoot in full manual, and I tend to then use shutter speed and ISO most to get my exposure. So for me, it just made more sense to change the aperture, which is on the front dial, to actually directly control the ISO instead, because that just means that I'm getting kind of faster control of the exposure. And then I've set up the exposure compensation to then change the aperture when I need it instead.
And that's sort of how you would control blowing out the highlights.
Yeah, I mean, for blowing out the highlights, I depend completely on the highlight alerts, and I go for what is white. So when it's white snow, I expose as far as I can until I see red, which is overexposure, and then I back it off a little bit, usually lowering the ISO.
Yeah, and I assume, Espen, you actually photograph a lot in the snow and have a lot of experience of that.
Well, yeah, but less and less these last few years. I mean, it's less and less snow everywhere, but I try and make it up to the hills here in Scotland where we get snow to photograph mountain hares in Ptarmigan and take a yearly trip to Dovre to photograph the muskox in Norway as well.
Yeah, I can see you've just not long come back, have you? And looking forward to seeing all the images.
Absolutely. Going back to muskox in January. So really looking forward to that.
Sounds great. I love it. Don, we hope that answers your question. Next question, excuse me, is from Drew. What is the technical difference between autofocus setting +2 versus -2? This is a really good question, and it is one, if you're into wildlife photography, you really should be using your +2s and your -2s in your continuous autofocus sensitivity. So basically +2, if you haven't got anything between you and your subject, if you've got a direct line of sight, so for instance, birds in the sky, or a direct line of sight between you and your subject, you would tend to use +2. Okay, so that's giving you a much stronger connection between you and the subject. But if you have a subject that has reeds in front of you, maybe you're lower to the ground, so you've got grasses blowing in the wind, or even doing football, for instance, and you've got players running in between, then you would tend to use the -2 setting, because that's not so touchy and it doesn't pick up the 2. So it takes a little bit of getting used to, and I would definitely recommend you set it to a custom function, because otherwise, if you forget you've left it on -2 or +2, and then you go off and do something else, you're wondering why the continuous autofocus is a little bit off, a little bit sensitive. Do you guys agree with that?
Absolutely, 100%. I couldn't say better. I would say my +1, +2 is when the subject is moving forward, backward,
Yes.
when it's going far or closer. And -1, -2 will also be associated with side-by-side movements. So +1, +2, quick movements, quick focal plane changes, something like that. But also -1, -2, when you've talked about the football players, I will also say a bird flying in the forest, crossing trees, something like that in this side. But I have heard and I have experienced that when the subject is moving side by side, if you have just one subject, it's better to use -2. If you have a group, -1.
Oh,
There are different algorithms in order to read the kind of subjects, but I will say that -1, -2 is slower, and +1, +2 is much faster.
Espen, do you tend to use the CAF +1 and +2 stuff when you're doing like the lek and the grouse in the lower grasses?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my default is to keep it in +2, so it's as fast and reactive as possible. And then when the situation demands it, I see that I'm losing track of the bird, maybe they're further away flying, or like you said, some obstacles. I go into my menu where I've set it up, and I'll change it to, usually I'll just go the extreme opposite and go -2. But that's kind of cool to know that there's small differences between the -1 and -2.
Yeah, you're right. And it doesn't seem a lot, does it, to +2, -2, but it does make a huge difference, and really worth playing with, Drew. So hopefully that has answered your question. This is a really interesting one. Apologies, I cannot pronounce your name, but it says hello from London. Is it possible to use the iPhone as an external monitor for the OM1? And does the focus stack work when using the HDMI port? Okay, Tito, over to you.
Yeah, there are two different questions. The first one, yeah, you can use, of course, absolutely, by the APP. If you use OM image share, our APP to control the camera, you can use not just as monitor, but also as a commander for the camera, and you can change your settings, the camera settings, and you can monitor the shooting with the iPhone or any smartphone, also Android. And talking about the focus stacking, I think there are different questions. And when you connect the video cable to the camera, there are some features which are disabled, and you cannot use them with the HDMI port used by the cable. So no, it's not possible.
Yeah.
When we sorry, Claire. When we make trainings or tutorials, we use two cameras in order to show the focus stacking when we use the cable.
Yeah, it is one of those things that a few things are disabled, especially on the computational side of the menu of the camera. And when that HDMI is plugged in, basically the answer is no. And if it's grayed out on the OM1, you can press OK over the grayed out section and it will tell you why. But on previous models, you don't have that luxury. So you just have to remember that if you've got the HDMI plugged in, there will be some of the computational things disabled, as Tito said. So I hope that helps. We're flying through the questions tonight. Keep them coming. We hope we're helping. And we've got lots of people joining from all over the world, which I always love these sessions. We've got the USA, we've got Canada, we've got Brazil, we've got South America, we've got all over. Well, Brazil is South America, but keep them coming. Lots from the UK as well. So hello to everybody. I'm going to go with Joe B's question. I understand that the EM1X uses previously captured frames to aid the predictive part of CAF. Does it use the buffered frames stored in Pro Capture Low prior to a full shutter press in the same way? That's an interesting question, because the answer is, to the last section, yes, it does use buffered frames stored in Pro Capture to a full shutter press. But what do you mean by uses previously captured frames to aid the predictive part of CAF? Do you mean in the AI section or in just standard CAF? What do you guys reckon about this one?
Espen, you, me?
Okay.
Okay. Espen. Yeah, I will say, but not just in the Pro Capture mode. I will say when we are focusing on the continuous mode, the camera by itself, not just the buffered images, while the camera is shooting, is also comparing the just captured images with the scene the camera is watching, is in front, not just in the Pro Capture mode. The difference, I will say, the difference between EM1X and OM1, for example, when we are working with the Pro Capture, in the case of the EM1X, you have to use the CAF tracking mode. But in the OM1, you can use any of the autofocus systems, so it's much precise, it's much faster in the OM1. I would say, because it's also using not just the tracking area, but also the AF target you have decided.
Yeah, and it's a much more precise way
I said precise, precise.
Yeah.
My English.
When you're using all square and CAF tracking on the EM1X, of course, your what's the word, parameters, I suppose, are bigger, where the OM1 has changed things slightly, where they're a little bit more, much more precise in that way. So not that we're saying get rid of your EM1X, as I've got one here and I still love mine, but it has changed. The algorithm and how it works has changed, and it is a bit more precise in the OM1. So it's not the same, but it's similar. And obviously the buffer on Pro Capture is bigger. So we hope that answers your question. Okay, we're going to go straight through the questions. We're going to keep piling them on. Guy says, having issues with OM1 and Starry AF focus won't work. A run through might be helpful as good season for night sky photography. Okay. Do you have a camera plugged in, Tito?
I don't know what kind of problem it's having, because it says that it cannot focus on the stars with the Starry AF focus. Some people doesn't know that they have to start the focus with the AF on button. And it does start, and you can also stop, but you can start and you start to focus and you have to wait. We have two modes, and you can configure the Starry AF with precision priority or speed priority.
Right.
I will say precision priority when you are trying to focus on the stars with a tripod, very quiet situation, and speed priority when you have the camera handheld or you have the camera hanging from your shoulder and you suddenly want to focus on the stars. But in the precision mode, you have the camera on the tripod, you start to press the button, the AF on button, if you have that option configured in that way in the, through the menu, and the camera will start to focus on the stars, and you have to wait until it finds the stars. It's easy.
I mean, Starry AF basically focuses to infinity. So what is it exactly when you say, Guy, it won't work? I mean, are you getting the symbol on the back that's saying Starry AF is up and running? Is it out of focus? I mean, what exactly when you say won't work, it's a very difficult one to understand the problem. So if you've got a bit more information, pop it in and we'll come back to your question, because as I said, it's a difficult one, that. So yeah, we will have a look. If you can tell us exactly what's not working, then we can probably come back to your question. I hope that helps.
Yeah. Maybe, Claire, let me just one last comment, because
on.
precision mode is slower. You have to wait more. You have to wait longer. It takes more time, and you will get more sharper stars in that mode. But it should work in both ways. Both ways should work properly.
Yeah. Okay, good stuff. Okay, any more questions about winter and winter photography? I know we've got lots of different questions coming in, but we do have some winter ones coming up. I can see them. I'm just going to go for a couple of these before we start those. Fastidious one says, I have a TG5. Looking at the TG7, is the battery different, and does the battery last longer? It's a difficult one, that, because the answer is no. The battery is the same. Obviously, the cameras get cleverer, and so they don't burn as much battery. They're much more sort of power friendly. But I wouldn't think that would be enough to make a massive difference. And I get that the USB is not quite enough. So when it comes to battery life, it's about the same, isn't it, Tito?
Yeah, nothing else. I think the camera is different. The TG7 is the latest model, but the battery is the same. And I think the energy consumption, the energy use should be similar.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, I'm going to throw this one over to you, Espen, because you shoot video for your YouTube channel, right? And I don't do a lot of video, to be fair. So Fred is doing video on the OM1. Would you put it in P? How do you shoot video? What's your setup?
I tend to use the default kind of camera kind of mode on here. But as you said, I shoot video a lot for YouTube, and I don't know if I can show it here, but on the custom modes, as I said, I use manual to shoot normally. And it's a pretty far kind of twist around there to get to the video. So I've actually set up C4 as my manual mode. And since you can set up so that you auto save the custom mode, or putting it at hold, so it remembers everything I did, it's kind of the same as in shooting in M. So then it's just one twist of the dial and I'm in the video mode that I've set up. I don't tend to shoot in P, no, except for when I get if an action is happening really fast, I'll just hit record, and I think it automatically goes into P then. But that means that it takes control over some of the parameters. So often I'm shooting F8 or something like that. So I prefer to switch to video when I have time.
Yeah, I'm a great believer in, if you're new to anything, put the auto mode on just to get a feel of the camera, of what you're photograph, of what you're videoing, and then start coming out into semi-automatic and full manual. You sort of do that backwards process, don't you? You sort of start on full P, but like you said, the issue with P mode is there's no control. You are letting the camera do the exposure, the ISO, your aperture, your shutter speed. So if you are photographing something a little bit more unusual, then P could be a little bit too much control. But Fred, if you're new to video and you're just learning things like panning techniques, zooming techniques, all that sort of the stuff that actually creates the content, then start with P and work your way backwards, then go to aperture priority or maybe even full manual. Can I ask you, Espen, do you shoot manual focus when you're videoing?
Usually I do, yeah. But I've set it up.
Do, don't they?
Yeah, I think so. And I mean, the peaking is so handy. So it's quite easy when you get that visual aid to kind of tell you when you got subjects sharp or not.
Yeah, I think especially talking from my point of view, I think I definitely got a bit lazy when it comes to video, because the CAF obviously has got so good over the years since I've been working in the trade. But there's nothing like pulling focus. When you go from something out of focus to in focus, or in focus to out of focus, that really creates beautiful segments of video that you can't get if you're using autofocus all the time. And I love that sort of style of focusing on a grass in front and then maybe moving over and focusing on the bird or the animal in the background. So a little bit of practice needed, but as I said, you watch enough videos, you can sort of start getting those little edited bits. But we hope that has answered your questions, Fred. It's got lots of questions coming in. It's really good. Simon Gidding says, is it possible to use AF limit in video mode on the EM1X or OM1? Espen?
I don't actually know. I don't think so, but you guys might correct me here. I've never thought about it. That's a good idea if it works.
Definitely. I don't think you can. No, I think it only. That's interesting, because and it's one of these things. All these little questions. It's one of those things. It's like, no, I definitely think it doesn't work. But what an interesting thing to put in my little spreadsheet that I sent to Japan. So the answer is no, Simon. Sorry about that. I hope you're well, Simon.
I guess you could probably use if it has a limiter on your lens, you could probably use that though, right?
Interesting, isn't it? Yeah. But no, definitely not. That's a good question. As I said, once a month I send over lots of interesting questions and things from end users, from ambassadors, and we send these over to Tokyo, and they are read. Some things are if everybody asks for them, they end up going onto cameras eventually. But it's always worth asking these little things, because you never know. So sorry, Simon, the answer is no. Okay, Digibirder, what is your advice on battery maintenance in cold weather? I am handing this to you, Espen.
I mean, the standard advice there is to put them in your pocket, close to your body, keep them warmer. But I have to say that I have been very impressed with the battery life. I've used them several times now, going to Dovra, minus 23 degrees Celsius, and I've never ran out. Like that's good. I felt like I've had as much battery as on any other day. So it is.
And do they stay fully charged? I mean, do you lose like a couple of percentage in sort of the life of the battery, or while it's on your body, or is it staying at 100% when you pop it in the camera?
Well, as I said, the standard advice is to put it in your pocket. I have to be honest, I forget, and I just had it in my bag and in my camera, and it's actually worked so well in cold environments that I've never really ran out any more than I have. I'm sure they will be depleted a bit faster, but I haven't noticed a significant difference. So I haven't really worried about it in the environments I've been so far.
And the battery technology has come on so far I've been in the trade a long time, but when you were talking about old nickel cadmium batteries and all that old style of battery technology, which is obviously now past, and the new batteries, the new lithium and the latest tech, the cells that hold the battery life do tend to be much better, and as that battery technology gets better, obviously that allows, well, you look at electric cars, right? We can now power an electric car on a fairly small battery, but obviously still a long way to go, but battery technology is certainly moving forward. So yeah, it's very interesting. So I hope that answers your question. Did you, Berda? Okay. David says, can you assign the high-res shoot mode to a custom button on the OM5? I'm going to hand this over to you, Tito.
You should. Good question.
As he grabs an OM5. So I think you probably can. So yeah, I don't see why.
It's easy to confirm because I can connect the OM5. I've never tried because the OM1, I use the OM1. I have configured I have customized my OM1 a lot. Yeah, that's nice. Let me try.
Yeah, I was going to say, I know. Oh, here we go.
Yeah, in fact, on the OM1, the video button is by default assigned to the high-res shot. But
right.
let me try on the OM5. Let's go to the button section.
Okay.
Let's go to any button. Yeah, let's see. We have the high-res.
Right, this is in Spanish, so you're going to have to try. Oh, there you go. We can.
I'm so sorry. Yeah, sorry. Let me.
Don't worry. You can read it out to us. We're not going. How are you going to find it in English, though? That's going to be tougher for you.
It's fast. I will go. Okay.
We should put it in Russian. Any button. So
any button. I don't think so. I don't think so.
So I think that's a no, isn't it? I'm sure. I'm sure it's a no on the OM5.
Nope.
There you go.
No,
I guess you can put it on a custom mode and then assign the custom mode to a button and then get it.
That's the way to do it. It's a bit of an elongated way round, but that would be the way to do it, is to assign it to a custom function and then put the custom function on a button. Yeah. We got there in the end, David. We got there in the end. That was interesting, but we got there in the end.
That's curious because, as you said before, Claire, like we learn every day, we learn a lot of things because there are endless questions, endless situations, endless possibilities. So we never try everything. So
no,
we learn from the users a lot.
Yeah, exactly that. And it's one of those things where if you've never done it, and if you've never assigned a button yourself, you're like, well, I'm not actually sure. So let's try it while we're live. Always the best way to do it. Let's try it while we're live. John Steiner says, when setting the lens stabilization option to on in the OM5, does lens stabilization work with the image stabilization on the OM5, or is this lens independent? So are you talking about the 100 to 400, John? Because that's the only one that's independent. If you switch it off on the lens, generally it switches off in the body. If you're using the 12-100, that certainly happens. If you switch off the lens stabilization on the lens, on the 12-100, it will switch off on the body as well. If you're talking about the 100 to 400, that works in a different way, doesn't it, Tito?
Yeah, because the 100 to 400 mils lens, the only lens you can select the stabilization on the lens, on the body, or on both. You can decide that. But in the menu, when you select lens stabilization, it also you also have the option to decide how do you want to stabilize the system when you are using third-party lenses. So if you have, for example, Leica lenses, stabilized Leica lenses, because they are not compatible, 100% compatible with our system, you have to decide if you want to prioritize the stabilization on the lens or you want to use the stabilization on the body, because they will not work together. Is that the question? Is that the answer?
Yeah, absolutely it is. Yeah, absolutely it is. So come on, get these winter questions in. We're loving all your questions, but you've got a half an hour of this amazing brain of Espen Helland. So if you've got any photography questions about winter, about going out, when's the time, what's a good time, all that sort of stuff, you've got this free session to pick Espen's brain, and let me tell you, he knows a lot of stuff. So keep the questions coming in. But I'm going to go into the next question from Robert, who says, my primary focus mode is single autofocus with face priority on. If people's faces are in the frame, will the camera focus on the faces and override where the green focus box is? The answer is yes. Face priority will override any autofocus boxes, sections you have. So basically, when you've got that on, it's the AI kicking in. It's looking for eyes, nose, face, sort of that shape, glasses, all those things that the algorithm is built into the algorithm. So, Robert, the answer is yes. So it is better to use CAF, though, isn't it, Tito, rather than SAF, right?
Yeah, I would say we have the best camera to handle this kind of situations.
Yeah.
Because, of course, I agree 100%. When you have face detection enabled, the camera will detect the faces, up to 8 faces, and the camera will select the biggest one. Yeah, that's how it works.
It's always funny when
The biggest one also means the closest one. Okay. Okay. Yeah, but also we have the face detection, but we also have face selection. In such a way, we can assign the face selection in the camera, and if you have, for instance, 6, 8, as maximum 8 faces, you can press the button, press and hold the button, turn the dial, and the camera will move from one to other, and you will stop and you will decide which face you want to focus. Okay? But there is another trick. You can use independently the release button or the rear button in the OM1, for example. You can use each of them to prioritize the face detection or the AF target. Right. So in the same situation, just by pressing the button on one button, the camera will see the faces. You can select any face, or for instance, suppose you want to focus on my hand, okay? And my hand is here. If you press the front button, the camera will focus on my face. If you press the AF on button in the rear, will focus on the hand where I have the AF target. It's tricky, it's very fast, and you can solve any situation with people just by pressing the button. Yeah.
And do you think when you're
I loved it.
Do you think when you're using face priority that SAF or CAF is the better mode?
Sorry. When do
you think that when you're using face priority, CAF or SAF is the best mode? Which one?
CAF in my case.
Yeah, well, that's exactly what I sort of
CAF. Yeah.
I was thinking I need to double check myself, but actually, Robert, all the bird AI, any of the AI stuff works better with CAF, right?
Yeah, right, yeah. Correct.
Okay, now we've got a lovely ambassador here, another one. It's Emily. Hey, Emily. Lovely to see you. I put your little message up because she's saying congratulations on the OM1 being picked as best wildlife camera chosen by National Geographic, and we are very happy about that little recognition because it's an independent review. It wasn't something that we even knew was happening, so we're very excited by that because Nat Geo, pretty awesome setup there. So lovely to see you, Emily, and thank you for joining us, and it's really good. Hopefully we'll see you soon. Okay, we're back to Don. Don asked earlier. Okay, I'm going to throw this one over to you, Espen, because you use Pro Capture sometimes on yours, don't you? So is there a way to make a change to one setting in a custom mode on the OM1 without having to go back and change or reset up all of the settings? For example, changing from SH2 to Pro Capture.
Yeah, so I think that kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier about setting up your custom mode so that setting it to hold so that it auto saves
Right.
any changes that you make. And that way you can jump into the super control panel, change your pro capture right there, or any other change you want to make. I want to say one thing though, if you make any changes, if you're using, I think, anyways, you guys might correct me here, if you're using a quick button to get into a custom mode, and then you go into the menu after that, I think it goes out of your custom mode.
Yeah.
So that's why I prefer to use the dials, and then I can make any changes, menu
Yeah.
or super control panel I want.
Yeah, absolutely. He's going back to English again. I love this, Tito. But you're absolutely right. If you're in, say, custom 1 and you've already set up your parameters, and whilst you're in custom 1, you decide that you want to add something or change something, as you're showing, Tito's showing you, when you're in C1, just press the menu and you've got the option to hold. And basically it will hold those new settings in that menu, and it's brilliant. It is absolutely fantastic, because if you sort of change your parameters whilst shooting, you don't have to set everything up and then go to reset and all such. So hold is it's a new feature, I think, on the own one. But yeah, it does make a massive difference to doing it on the fly, doesn't it?
It's a complete game changer. I feel like I have 5 full manual dials. They're all, I can change them as I want, and I just go back and forth. So it's great.
I love that. I love that. Good, Don. That was a good question and well answered by you, Espen. Thank you. This is a good one. Let me read it. I would like to ask. So it's from Vladimir. I would like to ask about the lens heating belt USB power. I have a 12 to 42.8. I need to heat the lens when the exposure will be about 3 hours in temperature -5 degrees. I don't know what you mean. I assume you mean wrapping the lens up in something, or what?
I think he's talking about an anti-fog belt, maybe.
Ah, okay. So it's an external piece.
Yeah, but I have one. I use one from Hammer. Yeah, I use one from Hammer. I have the Hammer one, and during the night, or if the weather is very, very, very cold, and you take long exposures, the camera heats, and outside is very, very cold, the lens will fog, will get foggy.
Steam up, yeah.
So there's a belt which is powered by USB, which warms the lens, and you will not have problems of foggy lens. Yeah.
I've never used it.
Otherwise, you can't clean it with the pad.
Yeah,
in this case,
you think about that logically. Obviously, the camera, after a 3-hour exposure, is going to be warmer than the lens, right? Because you've got all that power going on. But I've never. Well, I live in the UK. We don't get it that cold. When we get to sort of -1, it's all like, oh, everyone panics. But I've never used one, which is quite interesting. And obviously, like you say, even though the cameras are IP53, they are, one of the best ratings you can get for weather sealing. There is still some areas where heat and cold can get in. It may be a dust reduction and that sort of thing, but there is still areas for heat to escape and heat to get in. So that's very interesting. I've never used one, but you think have you ever used them, Espen?
No, and I want to say thank you for this question, because it reminds me I need to get one of those, because I don't do that much nighttime photography, but I did it right outside where I live, and exactly thing happened to me. Steam, or it fogs up the front element of the lens. I had it out there for an hour or something like that, and I first look at my photo and I was like, what's going on here? It doesn't look very good. And then I take the camera out and I see, right, I need to do something about that.
Yeah, I only use it for long exposure, because if you are taking it just one shot, you clean the lens and there is no problem. But when you're taking half an hour, 1 hour, 2 hours exposures, and mainly in the sunrise, before the sun starts to rise, this is the coolest time in the day.
Sure.
The lens starts to be foggy, and with this belt you avoid that. Yeah.
I've never used one, honestly. I assume they're different sizes and so on for different focal lengths, but and I would assume if you're outdoors you'd need a power pack for that, a battery pack, so if it's USB. But very interesting, Vladimir. write that down. I'm gonna everybody purchase a lens heating USB belt. I love the idea of that. So I want to see that on your next YouTube video, Espen.
Coming up.
Oh, brilliant. Yeah, who knew? Okay, Bill Dennis. Hello, Bill. I hope you're well. Lovely to see you. Is Starry AF supported on all the lenses? Yes, because it's a body, it's a body function. So it doesn't matter. Is it on the 1.2s? I don't think it's available on the. Yes, of course it is.
Yeah,
Of course it is. Of course it is. Sorry, I'm going mad. So yes is the answer. I would say definitely on the 17 1.2 because that's what I use for Astro. It's sort of our brightest lens for that, and I've definitely used it with the 8mm. So yeah, I can't think of one that isn't used on there. David will jump up and say to me in a minute if he disagrees, but I think that you can probably use all the lenses with Starry AF, yeah, because it's a body function, not a lens function. So hopefully that is answering.
Okay, maybe I have never tried with the macro lenses because the 90 mils, sure, but the 30 mils macro will also work. With probably not.
Okay,
David has the answer.
Yeah, David's in there now putting his 30mm on his OM1. Well,
yeah, of course, because I've never tried, and I haven't really the macro lens is not. We don't use it for stars, so
yeah, exactly. David,
tricky question. Hey, David.
I'm only jumping in because I need to try it out myself, but I recall that there's a limitation on some certain aperture range lenses, and it might be the f1.2s.
Well,
so there's something there.
I've used the 17 1.2 with Starry AF, and it was absolutely fine. But
I'll be right back.
Try it with the macros. I love that. We've got a question for Espen. While David is doing that, Espen, do you have issues with focus in blowing snow or not so clear conditions in the winter?
Yeah, I mean, if it gets snowy enough, then yeah, absolutely. And my solution is then just go straight into a manual focus. And I tend to shoot with back button focus. That means the manual focus is always available. So that's just my default. Whenever I feel that something is going wrong, I'm not getting focus easy, then manual focus is the first thing I go for.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where we went out to Poland a couple of years ago to photograph the bison out there, didn't we, Tito? And it rained and we were all very wet, which was we had a great time, but it was quite difficult to focus in that torrential rain. And I did exactly that. In the end, I went to manual focus and just trusted and used peaking, and then sort of picked out my subject using peaking. Because you don't want the camera sort of hunting is the word. When you've got snow between you and your subject, it's falling on every single focal plane, isn't it? You can't get away, so you need to sort of almost go past that. And yeah, I think you're right, Espen, straight into manual focus, lock on that way.
Yeah, I think even if you get it, but there's a risk that, like you said, it's going to start chasing, then you don't want to risk it if you're waiting for a behavior or something like that. So then you better just carefully get that manual focus in instead.
Yeah, even more in video. Like you say, on a still, you can try again, but with video, it's going to hunt. But that hunting, obviously on autofocus, especially on continual autofocus, the cameras and lenses looking for something to focus on, and you want to almost take that option away. So yes is the answer. Manual focus. David's back. Come on, David.
I furiously tried many lenses, and they all blinking work. They all work. I've tried the 30, the 60. I've tried the 1.2s. I've tried stopping right down and right open. They all seem fine. But I'm going to say that Starry AF is probably only, I would say, extremely efficient on our lenses, unknown on other brands.
Right. Good point. Yeah, really good point. Because there are over 90 odd lenses out there that you can use on the Micro Four Thirds system, and we can only comment on our own lenses. I think that's probably the best way to go. Hope that answers your question, Dennis. And thank you, David. I bet his studio is a complete mess now. Sorry about the dog. I bet the studio is a complete mess now because he's just sort of gone round, running around, sort of putting a load of lenses on. Okay. This is a really interesting question from Umnuki. Okay. Is there a possibility that the OM5 menu will be updated with the OM1 menu somewhere in the future? No, is the answer. I'm going to categorically say that. It would be a huge hardware. It's not just about firmware. It's a hardware thing to power that new menu. It would need a different processor, would need different buttons. So the answer in this case is no. That's quite categoric, that one, isn't it? Sorry. We do have a question for Espen. John Dolson says, hey, Espen, when in temperatures colder than -20, what's your strategy for keeping your fingers warm?
Yeah, that is cold. That is cold. Really good gloves and mittens. I have, many different gloves and really thick kind of mittens as well that you put over that. And I also use, when it gets really cold like that, I use heat packs like this.
Right.
They often fit inside the kind of camera gloves that are specifically adapted for these things. When it gets very cold like this, I would even say, you need, I've seen somebody who does a lot more in colder temperatures than I do, and they have some very specific kind of big mittens that they put over when they're not controlling the camera, and then go back to the camera gloves. Yeah. Absolutely.
It's a difficult one, isn't it? Because you want touch control, like you want to be able to touch the controls, but obviously the thicker the mittens, you don't get that when you
it's just that when it gets very, very cold, you kind of need to kind of hands off sometimes just to warm up, and then you go back to with touch control with gloves like that and everything. But whatever.
But I love the idea of the heat pads. The heat pads are a really good idea, isn't it? Because fingers are painful when they're cold. Well, they're not when they get cold. It's when they come back to life is the painful bit. And obviously, if you don't keep your hands warm, you won't be able to continue to photograph. So, good tip. 2 pairs of gloves.
There are some kind of battery heated gloves as well that I haven't tried that might be worth looking into.
Yeah. But I think that's a good idea. Your normal camera gloves under mittens, because then you can just take the mittens off and keep sort of the touch gloves on underneath. Though that might be, and mittens are much easier to put on than gloves, aren't they? You can just shove them on, and gloves are all the fingers. So
sometimes you even need to take off the gloves to go into the mittens to warm up, because you get the fingers together and it's better to warm up, and then you go back into the gloves and you kind of rotate a bit.
Interesting. We have another question for you, which I'm loving. Winter question. Do you use winter camouflage?
I haven't so far, or I have used it on a hide. So I have, a pop-up hide, and I use this kind of camo net over that's white. So I've kind of blended in with that. I've thought about it, but for some species like the muskox and a lot with the mountain hares here, you are often better, at least definitely with the muskox, to approach being seen. Approaching slowly, taking cues from their behavior, not rushing towards them, being very respectful of the animals, because you don't want to all of a sudden be seen in camouflage very close to them and spook them away. So with a lot of species, it's actually better to be out in the open. It just depends on the subject.
Right. Okay. And is there sort of different color? I assume there's different. Well, there's sort of browny camouflage. There's greeny camouflage, and depends on where you are to sort of which sort of color sort of suiting that you have on to a certain extent. But as long as you're blending into the background, you're not wearing like a bright red jacket or something like that. Most muted colors are okay, right?
Well, it depends on the surroundings. So in winter, your normal standard camo clothing wouldn't do very well because you'll stand out with the white background. So then you're right. Then you would be better off, taking a taking a white sheet or something and chucking that over you, you know,
That's true.
put a hole in it. Or there are specific, I know Tragopan is coming out with something as well that's, you know, it's the same as the, I use a lot of these camo ponchos or 3D camo suit when I'm in the forest for deer. So a similar thing to that, only in white and a little bit patchy, it is the way to go then. But as I said, it does depend on the species. And for a lot of things I'm photographing, I am sometimes better to actually be seen.
Yeah. Okay. That's interesting, isn't it? Which you sort of learn your field craft. And I'm assuming it changes with every different animal, but yeah, it's really interesting that, because I would just assume you would need to stay out of the way to photograph everything. But interesting, like you say, there is a certain amount of trust that they know, like you say, if you're going to jump out or going to come out from behind a bush and you spook them. So sometimes it's actually better just to be there and just to be calm and still, and so they know you're there without sort of spooking them.
Absolutely.
Interesting. Cindy says, what are the best settings for snow? Which metering mode should you use? And could you use built-in ND? Okay, so which metering mode do you use for snow? I suppose it depends, right?
Did you ask me there?
Yeah.
Honestly, I don't actually, I forget what metering mode I'm in. I don't really use it because I go with the highlight alerts. I basically only look at that. So for snow, I brighten the scene until I start seeing the red that lets you know that you've overexposed the image. I back off, and then I'm always kind of exposing to the right. So I think I'm in evaluative metering mode, which might be the default, but honestly, I don't even look at it. And for use built-in ND, I don't see why not, but you would use it when the situations demand it. It wouldn't help you just to take an image unless you want to take that kind of image to maybe slow down the shot where you have movement or something like that.
Yeah, exactly that. If you're going to try and capture a nice waterfall in the snow, then fine. What is interesting, Cindy, I always use full evaluative metering. I've probably said this a few times on our AMAs that the spot metering is quite specific and you should use it sort of sparingly because it only meters 2% of the image. And so it's great if you have a black cat in a field of snow, then spot metering is absolutely ideal because it's such a contrast between those two things. But you've got to be careful that you don't over egg it with the spot metering. So a little bit of practice. And I always say when you're new to it and you've got a subject, try it with both metering and then you'll see where it's best for you, because as I said, spot metering isn't for everyone. Do you agree, Tito?
Yeah, I agree 99%.
Yeah,
because because today we have tools to monitor the exposure with the histogram. The histogram is just you're reading the histogram what's the final result of the image. But my experience when I use the overall exposure metering, the camera trends, if you have the snow is white, but the white, 100% white is no detail. There is no any texture, and we need texture if we want to have a good picture. So the camera trends also to compensate the highlight, so high light, and trends to overexpose a little bit. So sometimes I need to compensate one or two EVs the scene. But yeah, I agree with both of you. I don't care in these cases. I don't care so much if it's spot metering or matrix metering.
Yeah,
I read the histogram. Yeah.
I think the metering modes on all modern cameras have got so much better. You know, they're broken up into so many segments, a bit like the autofocus points. You know, you get to that point where the camera is looking in so many areas at once, you know, and instead of it giving an average for everything, they are all metered independently. I think ours is like 37 sections, so they are pretty spot on nowadays, to be fair. So Cindy, we hope this is your question. Go on, Tito.
Yeah, I was going to say that also, and Espen probably will agree that it's not the same when you have a clear day, sunny day with snow, than you have a cloudy day with snow, because the clouds are diffusers and you have you can control much better the light than if you have a clear day, a very sunny day. There's more contrast, and you need a high dynamic range in the spot. So we're talking about snow, but the light is key in this case.
Do you know all this talk? I know I shouldn't say it, but all this talk, I'm desperate for snow now.
Me
I
too.
really want to go out and photograph. I hope we have a white holiday Christmas. I shouldn't say that really, because you know in the UK we do come to a complete standstill when we have a bit of snow. It's ridiculous. But part of me desperately wants some now. I want to go somewhere with a beautiful wintry wonderland. Okay, Anin Al-Farah, who is our last question at the moment, says, does the TG7 have high res shot mode? Tito.
Does the TG7 has a high res shot mode?
High res mode.
No, you have Pro Capture, you have Live Composite, you have other computational modes, but not high res.
No, it's the one you don't have on there, my lovely, unfortunately. I think all those questions, if there aren't any more questions, I am very interested. Is there any more questions, David? Are we going to quickly go through them and star them? I think we're all good. There's one here. Let me just quickly put this one up from Sheila. When going back and forth between a freezing outdoors and a warm car with the OM1, do I need to worry about fogging up? With any system, don't care which IP3 IP rating it has. If you're going from hot to cold quite a lot of the time, it is better to keep it in a bag or to keep it, because you could always run the risk of doing that. What do you do, Espen, when you're going from hot to cold?
Yeah, I see Tammy asked the same question as well, or a similar one. And yeah, I tend to leave it in the bag. So I tend to, very often, if I'm very keen to see my images, I'll take the SD cards out and I'll take the batteries out before I come inside. And then I'll just leave the camera in the bag and I'll charge my batteries and I'll upload my photos with the SD cards. But yeah, I'll leave it for quite a while, especially in like really big temperature differences. And I think I've never tried the Ziploc bag, but I know that a lot of people do that, so that might work. Do you guys have experience with that?
Yeah, I do think it's one of those things where, again, it's difficult because I tend to shoot in British weather, so it's not really hot and it's not really cold, it's just rain. But I would say that, like, when I went to Iceland, we would always put the cameras back in the backpacks before going back in the house, so at least there's some sort of warmth, rather than having it across the body, which obviously with a Micro Four Thirds system, the idea is to carry. You'll be lighter, more mobile, but you do need to think about those things. And obviously they are IP53 rated, so there are lots of seals on there, but that doesn't sometimes allow for heat and it's not, they're not sort of heat resistant in that way, so you do need to think about it. Maybe get some of those little neoprene wraps, they're always a good thing. But as I said, if you're wearing it on the body in -10 and then you go into a nice hot lounge that's got a coal, a wood fire burning, then that's a huge difference in heat, and it can make the difference. And it's not also sometimes on the bodies, it can be on the lenses. And of course, if you want to go back out again, so my idea would always be to wrap them up before changing temperatures. Yeah. Guys, we're at the end of the day. Can you believe it? So just a quick one. I mean, I told you that hour flies by, which is really interesting. Our hour's up. I wanted to say to you, if you're ever looking to take a photographic trip up to Scotland, Espen, we've put his link in there. His Instagram's there. And also the workshops. Espen does amazing workshops. And let me tell you, if you don't follow him on his Instagram, you should. There are some brilliant workshops coming up. I'm quite jealous and definitely going to tag along on one very soon. So I'd really appreciate you coming on at such short notice, Espen. Honestly, you've been an angel. David, come back in and say hello. Hello. Or say goodbye.
Hello.
David's put in the comments. Interestingly, what I would say, if there are some questions in there that we can't answer right now, We will go back into them and answer. But the other thing is, if you have any suggestions for an AMA, I did notice a couple in there, you know, can we do this? Can we do that? And David and I will, and Tito, we will look at all this stuff at a later date and say, maybe there's an opportunity to do a Zoom or a YouTube live or a Tech Thursday session covering some of these topics. And, you know, it's always good for feedback. So if you feel we're missing out on something, or if we haven't touched a subject, you know, get in touch. You can always get in touch through social, but also have a look through the back catalogue of YouTube stuff. There is a lot of stuff there. David's created a lot of it. Tito's created a lot of it. Make sure that, you know, the subject hasn't already been answered. And we will be building that back catalogue of tutorials. That's probably the right word, isn't it, David? We will be building them. Our focus next year is making sure that all this stuff is accessible, and we are building that education side. So bear with us. There's only a few of us and it takes some time.
Shall curate a library of educational goodness.
Oh, well done, David. Well done. Welcome to the OM Academy. I love it.
You can tell I've had 2 weeks off because I can talk like that. Very like that.
Yeah, you're still fresh. You're still fresh from your holiday. I'll sort you next week.
On day 3.
You'll be a gibbering wreck next week. Thank you, Espen, so much. David, thank you for doing the back-end comments and everything. And Tito, as always, wonderful to see you. And hopefully I'll see you soon. And
thank you.
Goodbye from everybody. Take care and see you again soon.
Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.